Later that night, Brian came straight to Salolia's house. She was already pacing the hallway when he arrived.
"We're all over the news,"
she said before he even spoke. Brian's face darkened.
I know, that's why I'm here.
"You said we will stay private."
I tried, but someone clearly wants to destroy my image, and they're using you to do it.
"Is it someone at your company?"
I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Nobody attacks what's mine.
Salolia flinched at that.
"I'm not something you own."
He paused. The tension cracked, and he stepped closer.
You're right, you're not.
He said quietly. There was a moment of stillness between them. Then she whispered.
"What do we do now?"
Brian looked her in the eyes.
I'll handle it.
"No, we will handle it together. We will fight back together."
Salolia interrupted him. Brian told Salolia to move in with him in his penthouse in order to reduce the rumor, and he also made sure they stayed in the same room because his enemies might send spies disguised as house staffs in order to monitor their movement. They were extremely careful. Over the next few days, Brian launched a quiet investigation. His tech team traced the leak to a private employee at his own firm, someone connected to his ex, Vanessa Creed, an heiress from another corporate dynasty. Elegant, ruthless, dangerous, and very much not over Brian. Brian told Salolia everything over dinner. Vanessa was trying to discredit the marriage. If she can convince the board that their marriage was fake or illegal, she can push for Brian's removal as the CEO. He'll definitely lose everything if the board believe her. As they discussed, the mansion's security alarm suddenly blared. A guard rushed in.
Sir, we have a breach. Someone's drone flew into the restricted airspace and it had a camera.
Brian's expression turned stone cold.
They are watching us now. Every move, every glance.
He said, his face calm, but deep down, he was worried. Salolia was no longer just a contract wife. She was a target. The following day began with sunlight, but Salolia felt a storm in her bones. Brian had left early, meeting with his legal team and shareholders to protect what remained of his reputation. Salolia was told to stay inside. Bodyguards now patrolled the gates. Cameras watched her every move, not from Brian's staff but from outside. Vanessa Creed hadn't shown her face yet. But her presence was everywhere. She hired investigators to dig into Salolia's history. Every financial records, even old social media posts. Few days later, Brian was hosting a big charity event. Rich people, business leaders, and reporters filled the hall, dressed in expensive clothes. Salolia stood next to Brian, looked elegant in a simple emerald green. She looked calm, but inside, she was still learning how to fit into Brian's world. The room changed when Vanessa walked in. She finally showed her face. She wasn't there to support the event. She was there to cause trouble. She wore an expensive dress and expensive jewelries. Camera lights flashed everywhere as people stared at her. She walked straight to Brian and Salolia with a confident smile.
"Well, you clean up nicely for a waitress,"
she said, staring at Salolia. Salolia smiled calmly and replied.
"And you speak clearly for a ghost."
The whole room gasped. Vanessa's face twitched. Her confidence cracked. Brian stepped forward, his tone cold but controlled.
Vanessa, this isn't your stage anymore.
Vanessa's eyes narrowed.
"We will see how long you two last with your little contract."
Brian took Salolia's hand.
There's no contract anymore, and we're just getting started.
He said clearly. As the camera flashed again, Salolia realized something new. She wasn't just surviving Brian's world anymore, she was becoming a part of it. Back at their residence, Salolia stared at Brian, her eyes narrowing.
"What do you mean there's no contract anymore?"
she asked. Brian had expected this question. He looked at her.
I ended it weeks ago. At first, I thought I just wanted a contract marriage, but I've loved you for a long time, since the day you spilled wine on me.
Salolia was quiet. She had felt something for him too but had pushed those feelings away because it was supposed to be a contract marriage. Now they both knew it was real. The next day, Salolia got a call from someone unexpected, Nora, an old friend she hadn't seen in years because they lost contact. They talked over the phone happily and they agreed to catch up. The next evening, she texted Brian that she was stepping out for a short meet-up with an old friend. At the bar, Salolia sat, relaxed. She sipped a soft drink as Nora talked endlessly. But what Salolia didn't know was that Nora had paid the bartender to put a potent sexual stimulant, mixed with a few drops of strong liquor. Soon, Salolia began to feel strange. Her body heated up, and her heart raced. She felt uncomfortable. She told Nora about how she was feeling. Nora smiled and helped her into a small room nearby. Inside, two men were waiting. A camera was already set up. Salolia laid on the bed, giggling, laughing at nothing, babbling, and whispering things she didn't understand. She licked her lips, swayed side to side, clearly under the drug influence. Just as the men were about to touch her, the door flew open. Brian walked in with his bodyguards. They quickly grabbed the men and Nora. Brian rushed to Salolia, who blinked up at him, dazed.
"You're safe now."
He whispered. Brian's men questioned Nora and the men. At first, they stayed silent, but after strong pressure and fear, they finally confessed.
Vanessa sent us. She paid us to record it to make it look like Salolia cheated. She wanted to destroy her image and humiliate her.
Brian was furious. He had the bartender arrested for being accomplice. The bar was shut down. Nora and the two men were sent to jail. Brian brought Salolia home. She was still under the drug's effect. She kept touching Brian and whispering strange things. She wasn't herself. Brian didn't take advantage of her. He helped her take a warm shower and put her to bed. Even though it was hard to resist, he stayed calm and respectful. He sat beside her and whispered to himself,
"No one will ever hurt you again."
Within 24 hours, the news went viral. Online headline read, Vanessa Creed exposed in an attempted blackmail scandal. Brian Maxwell ex tried to ruin his wife, backfires. Jealous ex exposed. Salolia Bandali dragged by her friend under Vanessa's order. People turned against Vanessa. Comment section flooded with rage. Vanessa tried to lie and deny it. But no one believed her anymore. She lost lots of fun. She lost business deals. And lost her power. Brian was finally free from threats. He considered suing Vanessa for attempted blackmail, but realized he didn't need to. She had already lost a lot. Salolia, now fully recovered, stood at the balcony with Brian. The wind was soft, the moon was full.
Thank you for saving me.
"I'll always protect you."
Salolia looked up into his eyes.
No more contracts, no more fear, no more pretending. Just real love.
It felt real because it was. Brian kissed her. Not like the CEO he once was, but like the man who had fallen in love with a girl who spilled wine. The days that followed were quiet, but filled with something new. Salolia and Brian were finally free of the contract. They began building something real, brick by brick, moment by moment. Brian began to show a different side of himself. The cold CEO slowly peeled away, revealing a man who could smile, who could laugh, awkwardly at first, but genuine. He became warmth, more patient and protective, not like a man guarding property, but like a man who knew what it meant to love and lose. One morning, he made pancakes. Burn, crooked pancakes. Salolia nearly choked laughing and he looked embarrassed. They were still strangers in many ways. But each day, they shared a little more of themselves. Salolia opened up about her childhood and her dream of becoming a writer. Brian talked about boarding schools, pressure, the loneliness of wealth, and the betrayal that made him build walls so high no one could reach him. One Saturday morning, Salolia was preparing breakfast for herself and the love of her life. Brian stood quietly by the door watching and admiring her. His queen without a crown. He walked over to her, knelt down holding an opened, small velvet box revealing a stunning sapphire ring framed in diamonds.
Marry me for real. No contract, no pressure. Just us.
He said softly. Salolia's lips trembled as she turned happily.
Yes, 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 1,000 times, yes, I will marry you,
she whispered aloud. The announcement rocked the media. From waitress to wife. Brian Maxwell proposes to Salolia. Cinderella in real life. But as the world celebrated, one person did not. Vanessa Creed. She shook the phone angrily, the news article still showing on the screen. She had spent years building herself as Brian's equal, and in 1 year, a bar girl had shattered her plan. She couldn't accept defeat. Salolia walked down the aisle, no longer a contract bride, no longer a trembling girl. She walked like a woman who had earned her place, at his side, in his heart. Brian took her hands.
I don't promise a perfect life, but I promise a true one.
and I promise to fight beside you, not against you.
As they kissed, the crowd stood and cheered. Salolia and Brian's wedding was like something out of a fairy tale. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with love, laughter, and happy tears. But it was the wedding night that truly sealed their heart together. Their first night together as husband and wife was filled with gentle kiss, sweet whispers, and promises of forever. They held each other close, slow and tender, making it memorable and magical, something they would never forget. After their wedding, they flew off on their honeymoon. They traveled to different countries, Paris, Maldives, Italy, and Greece. Each place was more breathtaking than the last. They walked hand in hand through the old cities, laughed at silly souvenirs, kissed under the moonlight, and talked for hours about life, love, and the future. They opened their hearts fully. Brian would say I love you every day and Salolia would reply I love you more. It was the best time of their lives. When they returned home, life settled into a peaceful routine, but love still filled every corner. Brian brought flowers for Salolia every day after work. Each bouquet came with a little note. For the queen of my heart, your smile is my favorite part of the day. Salolia felt deeply loved. Even though they had several servants, they still cooked together in the kitchen. One afternoon, Salolia felt dizzy. At first, she thought it was just tiredness, but she decided to visit the hospital, just to be sure. When the doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations, you're pregnant," Salolia's heart almost stopped from joy. She couldn't wait to tell Brian. That evening when Brian came home, she ran to him and said,
We are going to have a baby.
Brian was shocked and happy. He lifted her in the air and laughed with joy. It was the best news ever. Everyone was happy for them, especially Miss Juliet. She visited often to keep Salolia company and give advice. As Salolia's belly got bigger, she and Brian joked about the baby's gender.
I want a baby girl.
I want a baby boy.
Salolia replied. They playfully argued and even placed a funny bet. Later when the family doctor checked, they found out it was a baby boy. Salolia had won the bet. She boasted about it but Brian was still happy. He kissed her belly and said,
I guess I lost, but I'm still the happiest man alive.
One sunny weekend, Brian and Salolia sat in the living room, chatting and laughing about life. Miss Juliet, who also happened to visit them that day, told them stories and funny jokes. Brian and Salolia laughed as they listened. It was a peaceful and joyful moment. Salolia asked for a glass of juice. A maid brought it in, one that Brian hadn't seen in a long time. As the maid entered, Brian's smile faded for a second. He recognized her. She used to be one of Vanessa's favorite maid. He had thought she had long left. But now, she was here, in his house, serving his pregnant wife a drink. His instincts kicked in. He didn't want to panic or cause a scene, so he kept a calm face. As the maid handed the juice to Salolia, Brian quickly took it from her hands and drank it all.
Processed juice isn't good for pregnant women. You need something fresh.
He said with a smile. Salolia stared at him.
Who told you that? Are you a doctor?
Salolia asked jokingly.
He's actually correct. Processed juice is not good for pregnant ladies. He's the husband of the year.
Miss Juliet teased. Brian smiled. But deep down, he was worried. He wanted to keep Salolia safe. He went to the kitchen and personally made a fresh juice with hand-picked fruits. He brought it back and handed it to Salolia himself. The juice he had taken was clean. Nothing happened to him. But he didn't want to take any risk. He didn't trust anybody close to Vanessa. Later that day, he quietly called the house manager. He gave strict instructions. The suspicious maid was to be paid generously and sent away immediately. All food and drinks for Salolia would now only be handled by Mrs. Linda, their trusted family chef. Mrs. Linda was a kind, middle-aged woman who had worked in the mansion since Brian was a boy. She was like a family. Brian trusted her with everything. From that day forward, only Mrs. Linda cooked and served Salolia. Salolia never knew what happened. All she saw was a loving husband, always bringing her food, helping her walk around the house, reading stories to her belly and reminding her of how much he loved her every single day. Brian didn't just love Salolia. He protected her. He cared for her. He respected her. And he made sure nothing ever came close to hurting her or their unborn child. Few weeks after, something unexpected started happening to Brian. It began quietly, with a light cough and a little chest pain. He thought it was just stress from work or maybe the weather. He wasn't the type to get sick, so he ignored it. But soon, things got worse. His cough became stronger, deeper and painful. Sometimes it felt like his chest was tearing apart. Then one day, he looked down and saw blood on his hand. He had coughed it out. His heart stopped for a second. He got scared, but he didn't tell anyone. He didn't want to worry Salolia, especially now that she was pregnant. She was glowing and full of love. He didn't want to spoil her joy with his pain. He started avoiding her softly, spending most of his time alone in his large library instead of sitting with her like before. Salolia noticed his growing distance. She had thought that he was just occupied with work, but when it continued, she couldn't help but ask Brian if he was okay, and he assured her that he was fine. But the truth was, he was scared. He didn't know what was happening to him. He only knew one thing: he didn't want his wife to worry. Brian's personal assistant Felix noticed the change. He saw how Brian coughed secretly into tissues and always looked tired.
Sir, please, go to the hospital.
Felix begged. Brian agreed. The pain was getting severe every day. The doctor ran several tests, and when she returned with the result, her face was pale. She was clearly afraid.
Tell me the truth.
Brian said calmly. The doctor nodded. She swallowed hard and said,
Sir, you've been poisoned. The poison has been in your body for months. It's not fast-acting, but it kills little by little. It has spread all over your body and damaged many parts of your body. We would have stopped it from spreading if you had noticed on time. But right now, nothing can be done to cure it. I'm sorry to say this, but you don't have much time left.
Brian stayed calm. He didn't cry or shout. He simply sat there, calm, expressionless, quiet. Even though he was dying inside, he remained calm.
How much time do I have left?
The doctor looked down.
Only by God's grace will you survive, sir.
Brian remained calm. An additional test was done. They wanted to know where the poison came from. As Brian went home that day, he made a decision. He would spend every remaining minute of his life with Salolia. He prayed silently to at least be with his pregnant wife and see his child before he left this wicked world. From that day, Brian spent all his time with Salolia. He stopped going to the office and stayed home with Salolia. He cooked for her, held her belly, took her on walks, and laughed with her every day. Salolia was happy. She thought Brian was just being the best husband ever. She didn't know that her husband was dying inside. Brian acted strong and happy around Salolia but was dying inside. The doctor had given Brian some medicine to help reduce the coughing, and with that, Salolia didn't notice anything. A few weeks later, the final test result came in. Felix brought them into Brian, his face looking confused. The poison had come from a processed fruit juice. Brian frowned. He didn't even like juice. He never take them. He doubted if the results were real, but as he think deeply, he remembered something. That day, when Miss Juliet had visited and Salolia had asked for juice. A suspicious maid, Lucy, had brought it. He didn't trust her. She used to work for Vanessa, his ex. He knew what Vanessa was capable of doing. He had thought that she might want to harm Salolia and their unborn baby. So to protect them, he had quickly taken the juice himself, thinking he would see the doctor immediately if it was really a poison, but nothing happened then. He had thought it was just a normal juice. Now he knew that the juice was indeed poison. Vanessa had tried to harm Salolia, but he had taken her place without anyone knowing. Brian didn't tell Salolia. She was pregnant and happy. He wanted to keep it that way. Him and Felix began a private search for Lucy, the maid. But she had disappeared. No one knew where she went. It was like she had vanished. Felix was angry. He was determined to find Lucy and expose Vanessa. Whoever tries to harm his boss must be dealt with, and so he continued investigating and never stopped. Brian just hoped that God would help him stay alive, at least until his baby was born. Every day, he put on a smile on his face and told Salolia he loved her. Even as the poison slowly worked in his body, Brian stayed strong. Not for himself, but for the woman he loved and the child he hadn't met yet. Brian was alone in his room one quiet afternoon. He hadn't had a bad coughing episode in weeks, thanks to the medicine the doctor gave him. But that day was different. The cough came back harder, louder, and more painful than ever. He held his chest, trying to breathe. He reached out for his medicine, but nothing worked this time. The pain was unbearable. He tried to be strong as usual but collapsed to the floor, blood pouring from his mouth. Downstairs, Salolia had him coughing violently. She wondered what was wrong. She had never had him cough so loud and hard. Her heart skipped a beat. She suspended everything she was doing and ran upstairs as fast as she could. When she opened the door, the sight in front of her froze her in place. Brian was lying on the floor, unconscious, his mouth and shirt soaked with blood. She screamed his name so loud. Her scream echoed through the house, bringing everyone in panic. Everyone was shouting and running. An ambulance was called immediately. But just as Brian was being taken out of the house, Salolia suddenly bent over in pain. She held her belly, breathing hard. Her water had broken. It was time to give birth. The pain was too much and she cried out. Her mother helped her, and she was taken to the same hospital Brian was being taken to. Her mother stayed beside her, holding her hand and whispering words of comfort. Hours passed, but she still couldn't push the baby out. She was becoming weak. So the doctors decided to do a surgery called cesarean section. What happened next was a surprise no one expected. The scan had shown just one baby. But when the doctors opened her up, they discovered three triplets. 2 girls and a boy. When Salolia saw her babies, tears of joy filled her eyes.
Brian will be so happy. He wanted a girl and now we have 2 baby girls and a boy.
She smiled through her pain, already imagining telling him the good news. Later, when she asked how Brian was doing, her mother gave her a weak smile and told her he was fine. Even the doctor reassured her. But Salolia knew something was wrong. She could feel it.
I want to see him.
They tried to stop her, but she insisted. Finally, the doctor lowered her eyes and told her the truth she feared.
I'm sorry. Mr. Brian didn't make it. We lost him on our way to the hospital.
The room felt silent. Salolia's heart stopped for a second. Her breathing changed. Then came the scream, a deep, painful, a heartbreaking scream. She called out Brian's name loudly, wailing and clutching her chest. She cried and cried. She couldn't believe it. Her husband, the man she loved so much, was gone. Forever. Brian's mother and sister were heartbroken. They tried to be strong for Salolia, but they cried with her. They held her hands and stayed by her side. Her mother and sister consoled her. Miss Juliet never left her side, she felt so sorry for her. Everyone tried to comfort Salolia, but the pain in her heart was too heavy. Every day, Salolia sat alone in her room with her babies, crying, "Why me? Why did he leave me?" She whispered over and over. Brian's funeral came. It was a dark day. People cried, speeches were made, and flowers were laid. Salolia never stopped crying after that day. Few months later, Felix, Brian's assistant, was traveling out of town for business. While at the airport, he saw a familiar face. It was Lucy, the maid who had given Mr. Brian the poisoned juice. His heart raced. They had searched for her for months. Quietly, he stepped aside and called the police. In no time, the officers arrived and arrested Lucy. She was taken in for questioning. For days, they pressured her to speak. At first, she refused. But on the 4th day after several torturing, she finally confessed.
It was Miss Juliet.
She whispered. Felix's jaw dropped. He didn't believe her. He knew the relationship Salolia and Miss Juliet shared. She could never do something like that.
She planned everything. She told me to join the house staff again and poison Mrs. Salolia's drink so she would die slowly and painfully. But Mr. Brian drank it instead.
Nobody believed her. They tortured her again to be sure, and she gave them a voice recording, a conversation between her and Miss Juliet before the poisoning incident. Their eyes widened in shock as they listened to the recording. The police took the evidence and followed Felix to Salolia's house. Miss Juliet was there, holding one of the babies, smiling. When the police came in and called her name, her eyes widened. She tried to act innocent. Salolia, who was upstairs, heard some noise and quickly came downstairs, confused.
What's going on here?
She asked. The officers explained everything, but Miss Juliet denied it all. Lucy walked in and confessed again in front of everyone.
She planned it all. She asked me to poison Mrs. Salolia. She wanted her to die slowly with her baby, but Mr. Brian drank the juice instead. When I complained about it, she told me to leave the city and promised to handle everything.
Miss Juliet tried to deny it again, saying she was being framed, but when the voice recording of her conversation with Lucy played, she froze. She was caught in the web. Salolia's eyes filled with tears.
Why? Why will you do that to me?
She asked, her eyes soaked with tears. Miss Juliet broke down and fell to her knees.
I was jealous. I helped you to get a job in my workplace when you had nothing, only for you to come and marry my boss in less than a month that you started working. I've walked in pinnacle land but never found love. Only for you to come and got married, and not just to anyone but to our boss. A wealthy man who took you and your family out of poverty in a blink of an eye. Me who was once your family's helper now turned to the person you were helping.
Everyone was stunned. The house staff murmured in shock. She begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. She and Lucy was taken away. The news of betrayal spread everywhere. People online cursed them. The world stood with Salolia. Felix, along with Brian's family, took the case to court and made sure Brian got justice. Miss Juliet was sentenced to death. Lucy was sentenced to life imprisonment. Salolia cried for days. Her heart broke all over again. She trusted Miss Juliet, loved her and took her like her elder sister, but she ended up hurting her so bad. The pain in her heart was deep. 4 years later, Salolia stood by Brian's grave. She held a bouquet of flowers. Beside her stood her children, each with flowers on their hands. They all placed their flowers on their father's grave. Tears fell from her eyes.
You never got to meet them, but they will know who you are. Every day, they will know who you are.
She wiped her tears and smiled at them.
You didn't get to meet Daddy, but just know that he was a hero. He gave up his life for us.
Even though Brian was gone, his love still lived in her heart and in their beautiful children they made together, but he left behind. This story teaches us that real love is shown through actions, not just words. Brian proved his love by protecting Salolia with his life, reminding us that true love sacrifices and gives without expecting anything in return. Spend time with your loved ones because life is too short. It also reveals how dangerous jealousy can be. Miss Juliet, who once called herself an elder sister to Salolia, allowed envy to turn her into someone capable of betrayal and harm. Instead of being happy for others, she let bitterness destroy her. She even used someone close to Vanessa in order to push the suspicion away from herself to Vanessa. The enemies you know are better than the enemies you don't know. The story warns us to be careful with the people we trust. Not everyone who smiles with us truly wishes us well. Some people wear friendly faces but hide harmful intentions. Some people will help you but won't be happy when you start doing better than them. The only person who wants you to be better than them are your parents. Even though evil tried to win, the truth still came out in the end, showing us that justice may be delayed but never denied. Brian's death was painful, but the truth eventually brought justice. And lastly, the story teaches us that pain is not the end. Even after heartbreak, Salolia found strength in her children and continued living with courage. Though life can be unfair and painful, good hearts will always rise again. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. Kindly leave your thoughts in the comment section and also do well to share with your family, friends, in fact all your loved ones. Something good is always coming, so please stay tuned for more interesting and amazing stories from this channel.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to Hopela Stories.